All right. Hey, everybody. This is Lisa Vasquez with Memento Mori Inc. I'm with AJ Brown, and we are going to be discussing his latest release, Human Touch. And I just want you to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, thank you, Lisa, for having me. My name is AJ Brown. I tend to write Southern Gothic, dark fiction, and I like to kill off a lot of characters.
I think that's one of our favorite things to do as horror writers. Like, you like this one? This is your favorite? They're gonna die.
Yeah, pretty much. That's
Yeah.
that's the best way, get people fall in love with them and then
Yeah.
just, you know, Walking Dead theory.
Yeah. I think that's like you get the most reaction too. It's like this is your favorite, you're invested, you're all in, you're like, that's my favorite character. You're talking about them all the time, and then next turn the page and they're dead.
And you want to pull on the reader's heartstrings.
Right. Right. You
Yeah.
want to do it when there's a reason for it, not just to just do it, but when you have a reason for it, I think it makes it all the better. Like you're just doing it to do it. It's sort of like some people you'll lose readers that way, I think. But if you're doing it for a reason or there's it's progressing the story, I think that it's a good tactic to have or strategy to have in your book.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've done that, and you've read quite a few of my books, and I've
Hmm.
done that. And really, the one that comes to mind the most is Dredging Up Memories. And I don't want
Hmm.
to give a spoiler or anything, but there's a part in there where the main character finds out that someone's dead,
Yeah.
and it was his whole purpose for the book, and
Right.
it really changed the trajectory of the story. But it was an important and very emotional scene in the book.
Hmm. Well, I want everybody to notice that I did get dressed up for this because this is actually a very special interview. This is my mentor. So I love putting him on the spot a little bit. But if you wouldn't mind, show us your latest release and we'll go ahead and dive into that.
Well, actually, I don't have any print versions of my latest release right now because
Okay.
the print books I haven't gotten them yet. But
Okay.
it's Human Touch,
Hmm.
and it's completely different from anything I've ever done. To the point of where I almost didn't put it out uh,
Yes.
because it's a romance.
Hmm.
Here I am, big bad horror author, big bad dark fiction guy, and I wrote a romance, and I didn't know what to think about it. I didn't know how to really wrap my head around it as far as
Yeah.
releasing it. But then I actually started looking at some of my other books. Corey's Way ends up being a love story at the end.
Hmm.
Five Deaths ends up being a love story at the end. Even to a slight difference, but a different type of love, Dredging Up Memories ends up being a love story at the end. And
Right.
my Summer Vacation by Jimmy Lambert ends up being a love story at the end. And so once I wrapped my head around the fact that pretty much every single one of my novels or novellas is a love story at the end, I
Hmm.
was able to say, okay, this is just more of a truer sense of a romance, but without all the sex.
Right.
And
Right.
so, but it was one of the easiest stories I've ever written in my life. It just
Yeah.
came so quickly and so naturally. And I really, the character Charlie Massengale, the main character, he's just,
Hmm.
I was able to put like who I am as a writer into him because in the book he's a former writer who quit.
Right. Hmm.
And and it's funny that you say that I'm your mentor, and we've been doing this for 7, 8,
For
9
quite a
years
few years. Yeah.
now. He ends up mentoring a young lady in the book, and that's where they end up falling in love because he ends up mentoring a young lady. And so,
Right.
but it's just such an easy story to write, and it's such an easy story to read. And I wouldn't say it's wholesome because but it's just sweet.
Right.
That just feels weird to say about my work.
Hmm. But
So
I don't think so. I think that, you write stories about human emotions, right? And so, when you did a whole thing where it was like, hey, I'm horror with heart, and they're real people and they're down to earth people that are relatable. And so when you start bringing that into it, like your horror isn't horror to be horror. Your horror is the things that people do and the things
Right.
that happen to people. So, I wouldn't say that it's far fetched. I would just say that it's a different facet of what you're doing, right? And so in reading, now I'll be honest, I haven't gotten all the way through it, but I've gotten a lot through it. And I'll say that um, it's still you in there, it's still you, even though there's a romance. There's a sense of this dread. There's a sense of, because I don't know how much you want to tell about the story, but
Yeah.
I'll let you get into that in just a second. But there's this sense of dread in the beginning that I will touch on. So tell us what this story is about, other than being a romance, and then I'll jump in and tell you my reaction to it.
Okay, well, Charlie Massengill is a former author, and he quit writing 9, 10 years earlier because of an accident,
Mm-hmm.
killed his wife. And he decided he wanted to go completely incognito. He doesn't want anybody to know who he is. So he moves from Tennessee to this little podunk town in South Carolina. And he grows a beard, grows his hair out long, and he lives off his royalties in this little shack out in the woods. But he goes to this coffee shop. And it's in this coffee shop that this young lady sees him, and she's got one of his books, and he's got a picture of him in the book. And she goes, "Wait, this is you."
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "No, no, it's not."
Yeah.
And one thing leads to another, and further on down, they end up talking and developing a friendship and somewhat of a relationship that just kind of happens. But he's terrified when he realizes he's starting to have emotions for this young lady, because first of
Mm-hmm.
all, she's almost 10 years younger than he is.
Yeah.
Second of all, with what happened with his wife and what led to the accident and everything, it's just he's scared to allow himself to feel any sort of romantic or love feelings for another
Mm-hmm.
woman,
Right.
of how the relationship ended. And it was really, you know, really weaving that part into the story of his psyche, of who he was as an up and coming, a very popular mid-level writer, to this nobody who all of a sudden somebody recognizes who he used to
Mm-hmm.
be.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want anybody to know this. This is how does she know? You know,
Yeah.
and so there's a lot of trepidation in his heart about the whole situation, all the way through until close to the end of the book, where he's like, I don't know about this. I'm not sure about this. This is wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. You know, I don't want this, but I do want this. And so he's got a lot of inner turmoil that
Mm-hmm.
that's really feeding into his psyche. At the same time, he hasn't written a word in 10 years.
Yeah.
And that part of him, that part of his life that he still wants, he's terrified to have again, to the point of where he freezes up.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks about writing. It's got so many layers to the character. I think that's why he was so much fun to write. Kind of like Hank Walker from Dredging Up Memories. There's so many layers to him. There's so many layers to Charlie Massengill too.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the reading of it, like I said, in the beginning, there's a lot of dread because you're building up this character. And that's one of the things that you and I have talked about over the years, is how you have to get your readers invested right away, right? And so, Charlie is very relatable, not only from a reader standpoint, but a writer standpoint, because we do feel things in certain ways, and we do get that writer, that imposter syndrome, we do get all those things. And so what I thought was the most brilliant part of it, though, was not just the sense that you gave us in words. And we say use all five senses in our writing, right? But you used color, which I thought was so freaking brilliant. I was like, oh my God, it's the color that, because I was reading it and I'm like, why am I feeling this, very um realistically, like I was just feeling it like weighing on me, and I was like, it's the color. And I know that you're also, an artist, even though you don't talk about it, you're an artist. And so I feel like using that color theory was just so unique in how you threw it in there because it wasn't very obvious. But it was there where you're using colors of like a blue and like grays and like these like dingy yellow type colors and browns and things like that. So they're very neutral, but they're very sedated. And each as you're moving through from one place to another, like there's this, contrast of, bright colors versus these like dark depressing colors, I guess you would call it. So that was the first thing I noticed was like, man, like I was there. Like I was really there. And I think you have that gift anyway that, you can bring somebody into your world and they don't even realize they've fallen into it. But when you use that color there, I thought it was just unique and really, really brilliant. So I want to share the kudos on that. Did you intend to do that?
Well, interesting enough, and you've heard me talk about the primary colors of writing in the past.
Mm-hmm.
That's my
Yeah.
theory about how to write a story. It starts with, red, yellow, blue, and they're your main primary colors, and every other color is based off of red, yellow, and blue. So then you have your secondary colors of green, orange, and purple, which are just the mixes of two of the colors. Then
Mm-hmm.
you get to the tertiary colors, which are all the other wonderful colors that comes from those. And then you have the whites and the blacks, and you mix them in with the grays. So it creates levels of color.
Mm-hmm.
And writing is very much levels of color because each piece you start with a basic and then you build on that basic. So when I'm writing a story, and I think it's great that you picked up on that because when you're in Charlie's house, it's
Mm-hmm.
depressing. There's nothing in Charlie's house that even says anyone is welcome there. But then when you go to the coffee shop where they meet at, where Danny and Charlie meet at, it's this lively coffee shop. But there's sconces on the
Yeah.
wall, and so there's some mood lighting in there. And then when you go outside, when at the one point where they have a conversation, it's brighter, so
Mm-hmm.
it's great that that's picked up on because a lot of times I do that on purpose to set a mood for a scene or set a mood for a character or set a mood for an entire book or story, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was intentional, but I think it's great that you picked up on it because a lot of people don't.
Yeah. And that's what I feel like your writing is just a natural in that direction. So like when you're talking about the coffee shop, I mean, you don't even have to say the word coffee. You don't have to say it smells like coffee because you're in a coffee shop. You know exactly what it smells
Yes.
like. So you've used those senses, right? And when you go home, you're talking about when he's sitting in the car with his wife and he smells the alcohol. I mean, we know those smells, right? So they're very they're very realistic smells that pretty much everybody knows what those smells are. So I thought it was pretty brilliant. What I want to know is what actually inspired you to write the romance, and then what about this story in itself? So you've been inspired to write a romance. You're like, okay, I'm going to do this, but then what about this story brought up this story itself?
Okay, this story is Larissa Bennett's fault.
Of course
Larissa is,
it is.
if anybody knows, Larissa is one of my closest friends, but she's also my
Mm-hmm.
editor. And,
Yep.
and she's been my editor for several years now. And I was kind of in a funk. And she said, you need to do something different. I said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what? And she's like, write a love story, write a romance. I'm like, psh, no way,
Right.
not happening. And she goes, write a romance, write a romance. You need to write a romance. And she just drilled it and she kept talking about it. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So then my wife and I were watching A Star is Born, the one with Lady
Mm-hmm.
Gaga. And it's like, you know, this dude is basically mentoring this young lady in singing, even though she's a great singer, but trying to help her become, uh, as she get out there and get her voice out there and become an actual singer that people will listen to. And I wasn't even finished with the movie. I never even finished the movie, so I didn't know how it ended till like 2 years after I originally started watching it.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept thinking, this happens all the time in almost every profession. Why
Yeah.
can't it happen as a writer mentoring another person who wants to be a writer? In this case, it could be a female mentoring a male or a male mentoring a female. And I'm a guy, so it's kind of easy for me to say male mentoring a female because I understand the male emotions a whole lot better than I do the females, even though I think I write a decent female character.
Yeah.
But So the inspiration, the idea was Larissa's all the way,
Hmm.
and I'll give her credit for that all day long. But after watching, and like I said, I didn't even finish the movie A Star Is Born because my brain just started going nuts. And then I sat down and I wrote the first few pages, and it's just like it was so easy,
Yeah.
It's like I think I'm gonna like this character, and I
Hmm.
wasn't sure about the female role. I didn't have a name for her at first, and I didn't feel her, you know, and so I was a little concerned about, okay, this isn't gonna work if I can't feel the female character. And then the name Danny Overton came to mind. All of a sudden, she was a person,
Yeah.
not a one-dimensional word. She was a person. All of a sudden, I felt her. I knew exactly what she looked like. I knew that she's not your all-American beauty, but she's an attractive young lady who has confidence issues and who's struggling just like anybody else. And I'm like, this is my female character.
Hmm.
Uh, but honestly, I think the linchpin to the whole story is neither one of those characters.
Yeah.
It's Dee, who owns the coffee shop. I really think it's her character that really pulled the story together. Because when I
Hmm.
started writing her character in there, I realized that she was going to be the catalyst to them getting together.
Yeah.
And so yeah, Larissa's the reason, but A Star Is Born was the inspiration.
Hmm. Do you feel like Larissa has a little part in the barista?
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
know. I was gonna say, like, when you said Larissa, I was like, oh my God, it all came together right now.
Oh yeah. Larissa is every bit D, because
Yeah.
that's exactly what Lee would what Larissa would do to me if
Yes.
me and my wife. She'd be like, "Oh, really? Come on, it's about time." You know, and yeah, there was a lot of Larissa
Yeah.
in the character of D. So yes, I do. Do that.
Yeah. As soon as you said Larissa, I was like, oh my God, it's D. Like,
Absolutely. Again, that's key to the whole thing. You
yeah.
know, so it would be appropriate that the character of D. Now, even though D doesn't look like Larissa,
Right.
she
Right.
very much has the Larissa attitude.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
other than saying "F you guys, get it together,"
Yeah.
because that is exactly what Larissa would
It's,
do.
yeah. She's like, I'll fucking do it.
But there was, yeah, absolutely. She Most of the character of D is based on Larissa, just tempered back a little.
Yeah. 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 I could totally see it. So you have a couple books that you want to show me today. I would like for you to go ahead and show them. We can go over those if you like.
I mentioned this earlier. Five Deaths.
Yeah.
This
Five
this
Deaths.
this book was so fun to write and so
Hmm.
hard to write, because it's about a guy who sees ghosts,
Hmm.
and they're stuck here, and the only way that they can be essentially released from this world is if the people who killed them are dead.
Hmm.
So, and at the beginning, the main character says, "I've killed 5 people in my lifetime." All of them justified.
Yeah.
But you get to the end, you're like, "Were they?
Yeah.
Were they?" And I love that. And again, it turns out to be a love story at the end, you
Hmm.
know, and I love how that turned out. And the other one is Grimm. And,
Yeah.
and by the way, I don't know if you recognize the covers.
I
Um,
know slightly.
I know you know the covers. Grimm is my short story collection about the Grim Reaper.
Hmm.
It's got some really cool. I decided I didn't want to do your typical Grim Reapers, so I created these stories that, yeah, there's a Grim Reaper in almost every story, but they're not who you think it is. I mean, it's
Yeah.
an umbrella holding a little child's hand, or it's a painter, an artist at an event, who, when people see his paintings, they see their truth, they see the reality of their lives, and what happens at the end of the book kind of
Hmm.
tells you the Reaper part of it. Or it's the character Mr. TikTok, who tells a woman, hey, your husband's going to die in like 15 minutes, and she's like, you're crazy. And then, of course, she realized, wait a minute, this creepy looking clockwork type character might be telling the truth. And it's how what she goes through to get there and what she finds
Mm,
out at the end. And you're like, okay, those are all different takes on the Reaper, and that was my intention for that whole book, was to have each story being a different take. Like one of them, which I Death Becomes a Little Girl is the name of it.
mm,
And it's about a little girl who's dying of cancer, and she's like little, like 8 years old. And the Reaper's there to get her. And she's like, I know who you are. You're the Reaper. You come to get me. And
mm,
the Reaper doesn't want to take her because she's so little. She hasn't had a chance to live. So he trades places with her. And
mm.
it's how they trade places. And then once she becomes the Reaper, how much heartache she realizes the Reaper goes through. So
Yeah.
it's so many different great storylines, and it's just not a typical Reaper. And I love
Mm.
that book.
How hard was it for you to come up with something different for each one of those stories?
Actually, it really wasn't.
Mm,
Because I've written a lot of stories about the Grim Reaper and things like that. So a lot of these stories had already started evolving beforehand. But
yeah.
once I realized I was going to put out a book, I started looking at stories that I'd already written, and I'm like, I could do something with this just a little different and make this
Mm,
fit this a little better. And so I rewrote probably 6 stories to make them the way I wanted them. So I have an original version that nobody's ever seen. Then I have versions in those books, and
mm.
um, but it really
So maybe a
wasn't that.
Grimm 2 or
Yeah, maybe not. We'll see.
yeah. Mhm. So I do want to point out the background here because I do know that we kind of briefly went over this. What is going on with this on your wall?
So, well, I'll get to talk about Larissa again. A
Uh-huh.
few years ago, we were at Larissa and Tara's house, and they had a wall of, like, the hallway was done in paper, pages of a book.
Mhm.
And I thought it was so cool, and it was so neat. And so a few years ago, I had a ruined copy of The Stand by Stephen King. So my wife took the book, cut all the pages out of it, and created this Stephen King wall that's
It's
behind
so
me.
awesome.
And it's
It's
so
so
cool
awesome.
because, like, occasionally I'll find myself standing at the wall just reading the pages, just
That's so cool. Yeah.
and it's it's the Stephen King version that has the black and white pictures in it. And
Hmm.
so some of the pages are actually the pictures in the book, and it's
Yeah.
really cool because I'm like, okay, I remember this part. I remember this part, and
Yeah.
every once in a while I find myself going, okay, I need to read that book again.
Mm.
It's really
Do you find
cool.
that it inspires you to keep writing?
Sometimes when I'm in here and I'm sitting at the desk and I can't write, I do get up and I look at the pages, and I kind of read some, and I'm like, okay, I got
Mhm.
this, and I can sit
Yeah.
down. And other times it's, I don't know if you see it, but there is a picture of a typewriter on my wall.
Yeah. Is that
Um,
one more inspiring?
that was inspiring because it's like that's what I should be doing right now.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that typewriter is big, which,
Mm.
interesting enough, was from Tara, who's his wife. So
Yeah. And I
that,
had asked you like, oh, are you gonna do a shadow box and put like Stephen King books up there? And you said what?
no, 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 no. I'm putting my own books up there. My
Yes.
books are on the shadow boxes on the walls. And interesting enough, in our hallway, I think I have 12 or 13 of the book covers in the hallway now, but we're going to move
Yeah.
them here. I just haven't done that yet. But because I mean, I don't want to cover up all these beautiful pages. I won't
Well,
be
that
able
was
to
the
read
point.
them. I can't read them if I cover them up. And,
Yeah.
I really actually, interesting enough, this is what I find about stopping at this wall and reading. And it's the biggest wall in the room. You
Hmm.
know, uh, it calms me down sometimes.
Yeah.
because it just makes me stop, and sometimes, if you're dealing with stress, or you're dealing with, anxieties, or there's things going around that you can't, uh, health issues, and you and I talked about that before this, and
Mm,
stopping for 2 minutes and reading a page on the wall, it's just kind of like, it's almost like a recentering. And
yeah,
so, I love it. It's like one of the greatest gifts my wife has ever given me.
it's beautiful.
It's this wall, and it literally runs from here all the way to the bedroom door, and
Mm,
along the biggest wall in the room. And I love it, and I don't think we'll ever sell the house. But if we do, I'm not painting over that to sell the house.
yeah,
You get the Stephen King wall.
right.
Yeah.
And some people may like it and some people might be a little freaked out, but hey, it is what it is.
It is.
I think it doesn't matter. Like if you don't tell people it's Stephen King, they're not gonna freak out. They just think it's pages of a book on the wall. I think it will appeal to a lot of people because and especially since COVID, I believe like reading has just boomed, right? Like there was a little bit of a lull because the stores were talking about, oh, we can't sell in person, we can't sell online, and then all of a sudden COVID happened, and that's all we had to do was
Yeah,
anything that had to do with the arts. That's all we had to do, and I think that it gave the arts a brand new life. I think it gave it, this resurrection. And so I know people now that collect fervently, like they're just all about, I need to have this book. And then every single one of the variants, and even my daughter-in-law, she's got like 10 of the same book. And I'm like, it's so great to see, number one. But I think it's the most relatable thing we all have in the arts is that somebody loves a book in their life, right? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, one of the things I want to talk to you about is your writing because you write a lot. I mean, every time I'm talking to you, you're like, "Oh, I have, I have a new story that I'm working on, or I'm working on a new short story. Or, I was coming up with this idea, and you've got like a little notebook that you write things down on." Was it always like that for you? And how do you think that you can translate that to somebody who's like, "Well, I want to write. That's what I really want to do." Like, do you feel like because you constantly writing ideas down that it makes it easier for you to get the story out, or do you just feel like it's just something you got to do?
I feel like if I don't write them down, I lose them.
Yeah.
I feel like, I'll have a great idea, and if I don't write it down, or if like we're on the road or something, if I don't punch it into my phone, you know, I'm gonna lose the idea. It's
Mm,
kind of a fear for me, is losing an idea, and so I have notebooks upon notebooks upon notebooks with ideas in them. And I have the notes section of my phone has so many notes and things on it from when we're, driving somewhere, or out somewhere, and I see something, I'm like, oh wait, let me punch this in the phone real quick. Um, but I do feel like that helps though, because certain stories, Five Deaths, for instance, that first line was originally, I've killed 3 people in my life, all of them justified. And um, I jotted that down, and then I kept going back to that sentence, kept going back to that sentence. There was 2 sentences. And then I realized it can't be 3, it has to be 5, because if it's just the 3 ghosts, then you lose the importance of why he is the way he is, and there has to be 2 more involved, and they end up not being ghosts. And so, excuse me. Um, so yeah, it does help me to be able to write,
mm,
because sometimes, and I don't outline, I rarely ever outline, because I feel like when I outline a story, I know what's going to happen, and I lose the interest in the story, you know.
mm,
And I've got like outlines for several books that are like from beginning to end, and most of the stuff in between. But because I know the beginning, the middle, and the end, I have no desire to write them. So
mm.
I'll write notes, tidbits, and not all the information. And I've never, ever written down an ending. And I feel like when I write down an ending, I can't let the story go where it needs to go.
Mhm.
None of my books have ever ended the way I thought they would end. None of them. I mean, My Summer Vacation by Jimmy Lambert turned into a love story after what it was. That I was like, that's not even possible. Dredging up
Yeah.
memories and how it ended, and then going into interrogations, and how that ended. I didn't
Mhm.
see one of the endings to that. I didn't
Yeah.
see an extra character in Dredging Up Memories who ends up saving Hank's life. I
Yeah.
didn't see that. I didn't see in Corey's Way one of the bullies becoming one of Corey's best friends. I didn't
Right.
see that. There was no way that was going to happen because it didn't happen in real life. You know,
Yeah.
and so I've never written an ending. After realizing if I write an ending to a story, I'll never write it. I stopped writing. I won't write
Mhm.
an ending now. But I do think it's important to write your thoughts
Yeah.
because if you're not if you're not thinking about it, you're never going to write it.
Mhm.
You have to be thinking about it, and you've written enough stories to know that it percolates as you're thinking.
Right. Yeah.
You start. It's almost like it's almost like you're in the Avengers and you got Tony Stark with all the stuff in the screen and you pull here and there, okay, it's
Yeah.
here, that thing. And that's what, to me, that's the fun of writing, is being
Yeah.
able to, this piece here, put it here, this piece here, put it there, this piece over here, we're gonna put this down here. We might just throw this one in the trash, you know.
Mhm.
And I think that's what makes writing fun, is all the
Yeah.
puzzle pieces.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think just it's a voice that nags at you, right? When you have a good line, you're like, it's such a good line. I got to do something with it, right? And it just comes back. You'll be in the middle. It's kind of like the earworm when you have a song that gets stuck in your head, but like it's a word worm. So you're sitting there, you're like driving or you're going to work or you have a quiet moment and it's like, there it is. There's that line. You're like, oh, and you like want to go back and write to it. So yeah, I totally relate to that. What I would like to know, because we are starting to run out of time, I don't want people to not know where to find you. So tell us where you're most active and where they can find some of your works.
Okay, well, just like anybody else, all my stuff is on Amazon. You can
Mm,
find AJ Brown. Now, be careful because there are quite a few AJ Browns out there. So what I would do is type Corey's Way by AJ Brown. It'll pop up. It'll just hit AJ Brown, and then it'll take you straight to my page. Type AJ Negative, which is my website. It's been my website since 2012. It's just taken on a few incarnations since then. And Obviously Facebook. You can look me up under AJ Brown. And I used to have a Twitter. I got rid of it.
yeah,
Twitter is horrible. It's like the worst place in the world, you
yeah,
know. And but those are like the three main places that you can hit now. Uh, on my website, I also have my email address, which is theunderwriter36@gmail.com. If you ever want a print book signed, send me an email or send me a message through my website or even on Facebook. We'll make that happen. Uh,
mhm,
Best thing you can do for an author is to get it directly from them. And I'm not I'm not knocking publishers. I'm not knocking Amazon, but that's the best way to get it from an author, especially if you want a print book. Get it
right,
directly from the author. First of all, you're going to get it signed. It's going to be personalized. And second of all, that's where they make the most money. On
right,
Amazon, we don't make much. And
mhm,
depending on who the publisher is, you may not make much. If you get a good publisher, I had a very good publisher for several years. You'll do well. But I have a current publisher who the contract runs out in May, and it's like, yeah, I'm done with them. You
mhm,
uh, and so yeah, the best way you can help a writer is, and look, if you like a book, review the book, tell
yeah,
other people about it. That's the really, the word of mouth. That's really one of the best things you can do.
mhm, yeah. And I always tell people too, like even if you don't want to write a review, and you don't want to go on Amazon and leave a star, which is really easy because it always asks you, do you want to review this? But if you don't want to leave a star, you don't want to leave a review, but you love a book, if you got that book that was signed, buy another one,
Yeah.
you know, buy it and give it as a gift. everybody
Absolutely.
loves books as gifts. It's one of those things that they don't like it, they're going to give it to somebody else, right? If they don't like it, they're going to give it to the library. Somebody else is going to get that book, but being able to pass it on to somebody else is a real gift, I think. So that's probably my advice: is buy from the author, and even if it is just signed, not to anybody in particular, and you didn't enjoy it, go give it to somebody else, because
Yeah.
you never know. You never
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my final question for you is going to be, and I ask this usually of all of my guests, is what one thing, if you wish you wish you could have known when you started, that you know now, it would have made life so much easier for you, or would have changed everything for you, what would it be?
Get out of your comfort zone.
Mhm.
Don't be comfortable. Look, anything worth doing is hard.
Yeah.
Period. Anything worth doing is hard. I know we don't have a ton of time, but I'm going to give a really quick example. My wife started a business last January. It has been hard. She's been doing this
Mhm.
for 15 months now. And we're just now starting to see reap some of the rewards of all the hard work that she's put into this business for 15
Mhm.
months. Anything worth doing is hard.
Yeah.
Just do it. Get out of your comfort zone and do it.
Mhm. And have the expectation that it's going to be hard, and have the expectation that, like you said, she started 15 months ago, so she was working, and
Mhm.
now this is her only job, so she's got to work extra hard. And
Right,
that's never
right,
comfortable. That's never
right.
comfortable. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here. I think that we got a lot of information for new writers and veteran writers alike. um, you know Imposter syndrome happens,
Yep.
whether you're new or old. We're always looking for inspiration to write. Sometimes you're just like, man, I've written everything I can think of. There's always something else. So I think we've covered that too. And I just want to thank you so much. I'll always have you back, because we talk so much anyway. So we're constantly talking. So not only my mentor, but one of my closest friends as well. So I love that we got to bring Larissa into it. I'm sure she's going to have a big kick out of it as well.
Oh,
But also,